you're next. So I'd like to introduce the co-founder and executive director, Peter Bale, who, did you know that he received the National Wetlands Award for Conservation Achievements in Tarbu Watershed in 2009? All right, come on up, let's see if we can all downhill. Let's see if we can get that going.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited. I'm so excited to be here that I actually came 2 months early. This was originally planned for March 14th or something, and Rada changed it to May 19th, and I just quickly looked at her note and thought it was March 19th. So I got all my stuff ready. I drove out here, and there's nobody here. It's so great to see you all. Thanks to Rada for inviting me, and Eric. They're both, and their little son are awesome volunteers and supporters of Northwest Watershed. They come out and plant trees in the winter at our restoration sites. And also Eric donated some metal work for us, some beautiful gates for some of our conservation properties. So really happy to be here. And usually I give more of a formal presentation. This is just because I've been working too hard lately. This is just going to be some rambling stories, but hopefully you'll find some interest there. So this is stories from Tarbu Creek and Daybog Bay. And this is part of, I've been working on this with Northwest Watershed Institute for over 20 years. This is the largest conservation project in East Jefferson County. There's over 4,500 acres permanently protected, and a new natural area that's over 11,300 acres that they're trying to fill in and protect within that area I'll talk about. We're looking at landscape scale conservation from the headwaters of Tarbu Creek down to Daybog Bay. It's a partnership project with a whole bunch of different groups. You probably know some of the people in this picture. You can see Sarah Spate there with the Land Trust. We've got Dave Up the Grove, Commissioner of Public Lands, and some of the tribal representatives and other DNR people, and a county commissioner. So it's been in the works for a long time. Most of you, some of you probably don't even know where Tarbu Bay is because you don't cross it when you're driving up Hood Canal. It's one of the few estuaries that doesn't have a highway running right down the middle of it. So it's right up this arm of Daybog Bay. This is Daybog Bay, this is Quilcene Bay, and Tarbu Bay is right in there. And this map shows the protected lands. This blue line is a natural area boundary. So DNR, Department of Natural Resources, has a program where they actually protect land that's in boundaries that they identify. And it started off with a little salt marsh here at 195 acres. And it's been expanded 3 times since 2009. And this is the 11,300 acre boundary. And within that, DNR works and partners like the Land Trust and Northwest Watershed is to work with willing landowners to buy private lands when people, if people want to sell. And also the DNR trust land that's in there, the logging land gets permanently protected as part of the natural area. It's one of the least developed bays remaining in Puget Sound. It's really a treasure. You know, part of our project 20 years ago was interviewing some of the old timers, and this is the Williams. Jim Williams is on the right there, and this is him back in 1930s at the mouth of Tarbu Bay. He just speared a steelhead.
Wow.
He actually lived in a house, in a boat that was floated in at the mouth of Tarbu Creek. It's no longer there. And these, if you ever go to Tarbu Bay, you can still see these pilings, what's left of these pilings. So I've got a series of stories here, and you guys are my guinea pig audience, so you can tell me which story you like the best or not. The first one's, and they kind of tell about what we do a little bit too. The big tree is the first one. Has anybody been to the big tree? Yes. Good. Okay. Well, this is some of our volunteers doing spawning surveys on Tarbu Creek. This is lower Tarbu Creek, the lower mile of the creek. Beautiful. When I first started working out here 30 years ago as a tribal biologist, one of my jobs was to review timber sales and developments in the tribe's treaty reserved area to make sure it wasn't impacting their fish habitat and their wildlife habitat in their usual and accustomed area where they still retain their treaty rights. And this lower Tarbu Creek was so beautiful, you know, no development, great habitat, and Pope Resources wanted to just clear cut the whole thing. And I went out there as a tribal biologist and I was like, oh my gosh, we got to do something here. And I was just pulling my hair out, which explains. So finally, I was single, and I was going to a contra dance in Seattle about this time of year. What is it? Bumbershoot. No, folk life. Yeah. And so I was dancing all night. He came home in the last ferry, and I was so tired, I didn't want to go home, and with my old putty car I had, so I just pulled in to a road next to this creek and got my sleeping bag out of the back and went out in the woods and lay down, went to sleep, and thought, well, maybe something will come to me, you know, I'll think of a way to. And so about 4 in the morning, I hear this. What's that? It's still practically dark, you know, and I look up and it gets a little bit lighter, and there's an osprey nest in the tree right above where I was sleeping. Like, oh my gosh, because the timber sale had basically been approved and they were going to come in and log it like next week. And so I ran out and I called the DNR forester and I said, you know, there's an active osprey nest right in the middle of this timber sale. And so they put a temporary closure on for the nesting season on that part of the sale. And that gave time for me to talk to the Nature Conservancy and go out with them, and they agreed to help talk to Pope Resources and got Pope to hold off on their timber sales until we could find money to buy that. Wow. And so I helped Department of Fish and Wildlife write the grants and get the funding to buy the lower 160 acres of Tarbu Creek. That was back in 1997 or so, maybe earlier, somewhere in there. Anyway, so that kind of started my interest in Tarbu Creek especially. Here is the big tree that some of you have been to, and I still give tours out there. It's a giant spruce tree at the mouth of the creek. The second story is called The Conservation Buyer. And I have to give you a little history on the Tarbu Valley. Has anybody been to Old Tarbu Road? Yeah. You drive down Dabob Road, you can kind of turn off. And so you're driving down this big valley, it's all farmland. This is Old Tarbu Road in the probably early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, somewhere around there. You can see all that. And when I give tours, I take people and bring this photograph out because it's incredible. This house is still there. And you can see the giant burned cedar tree and these old growth trees. And this entire valley was old growth cedar and Sitka spruce. And it was cleared and drained beginning about early 1900s for dairy cows. And this is the old Yar farm, about 200-acre Yar farm. And that pretty well wiped out a lot of the salmon habitat that was there, because salmon like beaver ponds, they like slow water, they like all that stuff. So I gotta get to the story. This property came up for sale. I don't have a picture of it, unfortunately, but on Tarbu Creek, and we were in the process. We just managed to purchase the 200-acre Yar farm. And this other property was right upstream. And it came up for sale. We're like, oh, we went to the land trust. We said, oh, we got to get this property. It's critical habitat on the creek. It'd make a great restoration project, and it's up for sale right now. We're looking for somebody who would just want to buy it, and maybe we could buy it off of them or something. And nobody got out their checkbook or anything. But the next day, Sarah Spaeth called me from the Land Trust and said, this guy just called from Seattle and he wants to buy a conservation project somewhere within an hour and a half of Seattle, and he's calling all the land trusts. You might want to talk to him. So I called him up, and he said, yeah. He was kind of interested in the property, and I said, well, we'd like to do some stream restoration and re-meander the creek and do some work on it. Would that be okay with you? And he said, oh yeah, our family's been doing that kind of work for generations. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, my wife's grandfather kind of invented it. I'm like, oh great, this is gonna be some nut, you know. He said, oh really? I said, who was that? He said, Aldo Leopold. So my jaw dropped. I was like, oh, okay. So they ended up coming out to the property, and the granddaughter of the person who wrote Salmon County Almanac, one of the greatest conservationists of the 20th century, and helped start the Wilderness Act and all that kind of stuff. And they were just really nice people, and they wanted to do restoration. They ended up buying this property.
Oh my gosh.
And here's right after the restoration. This is the stream re-meander. It used to be in a ditch running through the middle of the property, and all that wood was brought in. And our crew does a lot of work as well. This is our field crew. And so we've done a lot of this kind of work. Here's the main valley. Yeah, so this was all re-meander. It used to run right along the ditch in the road, right in through the ditch. And a lot of wetlands. That first ditch you saw was plugged up, and these are some of the wetlands for western toads, which love this type of habitat. So a lot of wetlands, a lot of stream restoration, a lot of salmon habitat. Okay, the second and third one. This is thank God for dentures. I don't know if I can pull this one off, but one thing we do is take out fish passage barriers. We've taken out almost every barrier on Tarbu Creek, like this one. When I first saw this, there were this is during the summer, but during the winter, there's a pool right here, and there were 30 coho salmon in there, trying to jump up into that culvert. And it's such a slope that they'd slide back down. They'd jump up, and it was really sad to see. And eventually we got that fixed, and a lot of other culverts. This one was pulled out. And putting in bridges. This is on Old Tarbu Road, actually. You may have seen this bridge. So we were working on another bridge just like this, and the crane operator had to, this is a big crane, and it lifts the bridge into place. And the place he had to do it was a really wet area. And this guy, I didn't know it at the time, but he was pretty crazy. Like, he came out there and he just stuck some rotten wood under the sides of this crane, and it's going, and he lifted up this crane off of the truck and lifted it right over the cab of the truck. And the truck driver, this big giant truck, he went ballistic. He said, "You never lift anything over my truck." It's like not something you do. And they got into the biggest pissing match you've ever seen. And I mean, the one guy, they were screaming at each other, and the one guy went back to his truck. I'm like, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to get my gun." I'm like, no, don't do that. And I'm trying to keep these guys from killing each other out there. Meanwhile, one of the neighbors was a big biker, great guy, big Vietnam vet. He came out, and I thought maybe this guy can help me. He's got the leather jacket on and everything. And so he comes over, and he gets in between the two guys, and he pops out his teeth. He just pulls out his teeth. And the two guys look at him like, they just stop fighting, they like look at each other. You know, okay, and they just go back and just go to work. What did you do? He said, when you don't have any teeth, you don't have anything to lose. So that ended happily for them. So we got all our bridges in. And fish are going up a lot of these streams. These are two coho. We have coho that are going up a creek that didn't see salmon for 50 years, and after the culvert was removed, the next year, coho were going up.
You might want to mention that that's the culvert under the main highway.
Yes. Yeah, under Center Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was not a little project.
Okay, the next one, okay, we're getting kind of underage labor. This is, I just want to talk about this. This is our plant-a-thon, and it's about the, I think last year was the 20th year of the annual plant-a-thon, when we get kids from local schools to come out and plant trees. And this started with my wife, our kids were in school, and little kids, and the teacher was like, we want all the kids to go out and sell cookies to make money for the school. And she's like, why don't we do something else? Why don't we need lots of trees planted, why don't we go out and plant trees? So she started the plant-a-thon. And every year a piece of art would be made. A beautiful local artist would make a card, and that card would be the plant-a-thon honorary tree card. And people would buy a card, and for like $10, all the money would go to the schools, and the kids would come out and plant trees all in one day for the card. So it was a wonderful program, but it was kind of like putting on a wedding every year. It was a huge amount of work to organize everything. And our crew would get all the trees and area ready for planting about 3,000 trees. So lately we've been doing smaller planting, so we'll get one school at a time that comes out and plant trees. Here's a tree card from one year. It gets sold. So the kids would go around and sell these cards and get the money. And then parents and kids would come out and plant trees. This is the Quilcene Lantern property, if you've been up there, old Olympic Music Festival. And I didn't have time to put this together right, but it's amazing because if you go out there now, the trees are like 40 feet tall. Yeah, this is all forested at this point. And this is a re-meandered creek that we put in. So this is another site where we're putting cardboard and willow stakes in. People coming out. Okay, now I gotta keep your attention. So this one is Sex on the Beach. Okay, so one of the things we did was when we started working on Tarbu Creek was realized how amazing Tarbu Bay was. I mean, this place was incredible and nobody had really studied anything about it. So one of the first things we did was a nearshore fish survey where we put this net out and captured juvenile salmon that are along the shoreline. And it turned out that this bay has these beautiful summer chum salmon. And they're a threatened species, a federally listed threatened species. They live all along the shoreline in the spring at Daybog Bay. So it's things like that we were finding out is really great. One of the other things we found out was that Daybog Bay has one of the few documented springtime convocations of eagles that come into the bay. And up to 150 eagles come in to certain sections, certain beaches every year. And people suspected what was going on, but nobody really knew why they were coming into these beaches. About May and June, about this time of year. Well, it turns out that underneath the rocks, there's something called a midshipman. You can't really see it there. They lay their eggs on the bottom side of the rock. And they live, here's a midshipman. They're a type of mudfish. They can actually breathe air. but most of the year they live up to 500 feet deep.
No.
And that's why
What?
they live in the deep water, and they actually have, they're called midshipmen because they have these spots on their belly like a midshipman Navy outfit, I guess.
Really?
And they glow in the dark. I'm sorry I don't have a picture, but I do, believe me, they do glow in the dark. And I think they think it's to feed on their prey in this deep water. But once a year they come up to the shallows and they nest in the intertidal area. They make kind of they're called growlers too, and they make kind of a growling sound. And in Seattle, people call the police at night because they think there's some terrible thing happening down the beach. But it's basically these group spawners. All the midshipmen get together and have this mass spawning event where the males are calling in the females to the beach underneath the rocks. There's so here's a report we did on, it's on our website if you want to learn more about it. Bald eagles, oyster beds, and plainfin midshipmen. They also nest under oyster beds. And here's an eagle coming in to feed on the midshipmen. So we wrote that report, and all of a sudden I'm in my office and I get this call. And it's a producer who's doing a David Attenborough blue chip special Netflix nature movie about sound. And he calls me and says, we need to find some midshipmen to photograph. We're going to send our scuba crew out there. We're going to get sound recordings, everything. And can you help us find some midshipmen out there? And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, I might be able to help you, but if David Attenborough can't do the narration, I want to be the fill-in for that. And he goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, listen to this. 6 on the beach has never been more vociferous than when the plain fin midshipmen arrive. So he started laughing. He gave me the job anyway. So we found the midshipmen, and we actually had a hard time finding them because they needed to get their camera equipment really close, and have plug-ins and all that. And finally, one of our supporters over on Point Whitney, over in that area, Palawi Point, there's real rocky beaches there, and there's some people there, and she was glad to have them come, and they camped out there for 3 months, and they made artificial, like a rock with some little rocks under it, and they put their microphones in there. And if you look on Netflix under David Attenborough, nature series, there's one called Sounds of Nature or something. And out of that whole 3 months, they've got like 5 minutes on the midshipmen. But it's actually worth seeing. It's pretty cool. And Dave, he did an okay job, but so let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, so one of the other things that they ended up was protecting these older forests. So this is some of the work recently we've been doing to protect the old forests around the bay, these legacy forests. This one was going to be chopped down by DNR, and we were able to stop it because there's some globally rare plant associations there. And now it's included within the Daybod Bay Natural Area. So.
Why was DNR going to chop it down?
It was just part of their state trust lands, and they set and rated. We had a lot of tours out there, and in fact, we took Hillary Franz out there, who was the Commissioner of Public Lands, and even she, when she got out there, she was like, no, we shouldn't have done this. So it was, here's the Daybod Bay area and the trust lands around there. And that's the end of my show. Does anybody have any questions about any of this stuff?
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And Peter, weren't you involved
in getting the funding also so that the lost forest out on Beckett Point got funded?
Yeah, that was another trust land transfer project. The legislature puts money into trust land transfer. And it's really, people don't know about that program, but it's really important because the only way DNR can protect their state trust lands by reimbursing the trust. So the state legislature puts a couple million into Cape George. It's gonna probably cost 3.6 million. That money will be used to buy replacement land, and the Cape George land will be permanently protected and go to the county for management as basically a county park. So, yeah.
And where do you get your money to buy?
You guys.
To buy this land?
Yeah,
Just
no,
offer
we, a lot of grant funding,
Yeah,
a lot of national coastal grants and state
Coastal
grants,
grants,
and a lot of grant funding that we try and get. And then also, it's our private donors are really important to us, because they're the seed money that makes us able to write the grant to get the money to do the project. So, in fact, thank you for bringing that up. If you guys want to put your email on here, you will get announcements for any field trips we do, any action alerts for, like, a lot of times it's really important to have people call their legislature or email their legislature to get money for trust land transfer for protecting places like Cape George or Daybon Bay. So if you're not on our list already, you can just pass this around and we'll get updated.
How many staff do you all have?
We've got 3 kind of permanent staff and then field crew. So, yeah, and a board of directors, which is a wonderful board of directors we have. So.
Are any of these accessible for like hiking or kayaking unless without a guide or in your group?
Yes, Daybon Bay is kind of interesting because it is difficult to get in there. It's kind of like a wilderness bay, but if you come in from the Quilcene Marina, you know, the marina, Herbeck Marina, you can kayak over into Daybon Bay, or you can start at the head of Targu Bay at a high tide and go out. But if the tide gets low, you're stuck in the mud flats.
Do you still like, how do you get on the list for, I didn't get anything for tree planting this year. Is that sometimes not open to the
Yeah,
public,
it's
or-
really a bummer that because the state legislative budgets are so bad, they've cut out a lot of our youth funding for we used to have a youth environmental stewards program that helped pay for we also had monthly volunteer events.
Yeah.
So this year, that's all on hold until we get some more funding in.
Okay.
So, yeah. Yeah, we had a youth environmental stewards program for probably 6 years that had about 15 high school kids that would come out every summer for 2 weeks and do actual restoration and tour the watershed and that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay.
Peter, what are some of the big things that are coming up for your organization? What do you have your sights on now?
We've got some pretty big land acquisitions in the works right now. And one of them, the funding's being held up by the federal government, no surprise.
Really?
We're trying to persuade DNR to buy 2,000 acres at the headwaters of Targu Creek as new state trust land. Right now it's owned by Rainier Timber Company. And they can sell at any moment for development or whatever. And so we'd like to get it into just state timberland and protect these areas that help keep the water clean going into the bay. That's some of the stuff.
Maybe if you build a detention center on that property. That's really a good idea. Oh, God.
All right, well, thank you.